customs, to discussions upon present realities and ultimate purposes, is perhaps more frequent among Spanish and Portuguese Americans than among our own readers, who are apt to be over-insistent in their demands for swift, visible action. Yet, in the hands of a master, it possesses no less interest than the more obvious type of fiction, for ideas possess more life than the persons who are moved by them. The idea that carries Milkau from the old world to the new is an ideal of human brotherhood, high purpose, and dissatisfaction with the old, degenerate world. In the state of Espírito Santo, where the German colonists are dominant, he plans a simple life that shall drink inspiration in the youth of a new, virgin continent. He falls in with another German, Lenz, whose outlook upon life is at first the very opposite to Milkau's blend of Christianity and a certain liberal socialism. The strange milieu breeds in both an intellectual languor that vents itself in long discussions, in breeding contemplation, mirages of the spirit. Milkau is gradually struck with something wrong in the settlement. Little by little it begins to dawn upon him that something of the old-world hypocrisy, fraud and insincerity is contaminating this supposedly virgin territory. Here he discovers no paradise à la Rousseau, no natural man untainted by the ills of civilization. Graft is a rampant as in any district of the world across the sea. Cruelty is rife. His pity is aroused by the plight of Mary, a destitute servant who is betrayed by the son of her employers. Not only does the scamp desert her when she most needs his protection and acknowledgment, but he is silent when his equally vicious parents drive her forth to a life of intense hardship. She is spurned at every door and reduced to beggary. Her child is born under the most distressing circumstances, and under conditions that strike the note of horror the infant is slain before her very eyes while she gazes helplessly on. Mary is accused of infanticide, and since she lacks witnesses, she is placed in a very difficult position. Moreover, the father of her child bends every effort to loosen the harshest measures of the community against her, whereupon Milkau, whose heart is open to the sufferings of the universe, has another opportunity to behold man's inhumanity to woman. His pity turns to what pity is akin to. He effects her release from jail, and together they go forth upon a journey that ends in the delirium of death. The promised land had proved a mirage, at least for the present. And it is upon this indecisive note that the book ends. Ferrero's introduction, though short, is substantial and to the point. It is natural that he should have taken such a liking to the book, for Aranha's work is of intense interest to the reader who looks for psychological power, and Ferrero himself is the exponent of history as psychology rather than as economic materialism. The critics, he says, will judge the literary merits of this novel. As a literary amateur, I will point out among its qualities the beauty of its style and its descriptions, the purity of the psychological analysis, the depth of the thoughts and the reflections of which the novel is full, and among its faults, a certain disproportion between the different parts of the book, and an ending which is too vague, indefinite, and unexpected. But its literary qualities seem to me to be of secondary importance to the profound and incontrovertible idea that forms the kernel of the book. Here in Europe, we are accustomed to say that modern civilization develops itself in America more freely than in Europe, for in the former country it has not to surmount the obstacle of an older society firmly established, as in the case of the latter. Because of this, we call America the country of the young, and we consider the New World as the great force which decomposes the old European social organization. That idea is, as Ferrero points out, an illusion due to distance. He points out, too, that here is everywhere an old America struggling against a new one, and this is very curious. The new America, which upsets traditions, is formed above all by the European immigrants who seek a place for themselves in the country of their adoption, whereas the real Americans represent the conservative tendencies. Europe exerts on American society, through its immigrants, the same dissolving action which America exerts, through its novelties and its example, on the old civilization of Europe. The point is very well taken, and contains the germ of a great novel of the United States. And just as Canaan stands by itself in Brazilian literature, so might such a novel achieve preeminence in our own. Ferrero is quite right in indicating the great non-literary importance of the novel, though not all readers will agree with him as to the excessive vagueness of the end. Hardly any other type of ending would have befitted a novel that treats of transition, of a landscape that dazzles and enthralls, of possibilities that founder, not through the malignance of fate, but through the stupidity of man. There is an epic swirl to the finale that reminds one of the disappearance of an ancient deity in a pillar of dust. For an uncommon man like Milkau, an uncommon end was called for. Numerous questions are touched upon in the course of the leisurely narrative, everywhere opening up new vistas of thought. For Aranha is philosophically, critically inclined. His training is cosmopolitan, as his life has been. He knows the great Germans, Scandinavians, Belgians, and Russians. His native exuberance has been tempered by a serenity that is the product of European influence. He is some 52 years of age, has served his nation at Christiania, as minister, at The Hague, and as a leader in the Allied cause. He is, therefore, an acknowledged and proven spokesman. The author of Canaan has done other things, among which this book, which has long been known in French and Spanish, stands out as a document that marks an epoch in Brazilian history as well as a stage in Brazilian literature. Whether it is the great American novel is of interest only to literary politicians and pigeonholers. It is a great novel, whether of America or Europe, and that suffices for the lover of belles lettres. In considering the work of such writers as these and the authors represented in this little pioneer volume, one should bear continually in mind the many handicaps under which authorship labors in Portuguese and Spanish America. A small reading public, lack of publishers, widespread prevalence of illiteracy, instability of politics. Under the circumstances, it is not so much to be wondered at that the best work is of such a high average as that it was done at all. For in nations where education is so limited and illiteracy so prevalent, the manifold functions which, in more highly developed nations, are performed by many, are perforce done by few. Hence, the spectacle in the new Spanish and Portuguese world, as in the old, of men and women who are at once journalists, novelists, dramatists, politicians, soldiers, poets, and what not else. Such a versatility, often joined to a literary prolixity, no doubt serves to lower the artistic worth of works produced under such conditions. In connection with the special character of the tales included in the present sample of modern Brazilian short stories, particularly those by Machado de Assis and Medeiros Albuquerque, it is interesting to keep in mind the popularity of Poe and Hawthorne in South America. The introspection of these men, as of de Maupassant and kindred spirits, appeals to a like characteristic of the Brazilians. Such inner seeking, however, such preoccupation with psychological problems, does not often in these writers reach the point of morbidity which we have become accustomed to expect in the novels and tales of the Russians. Stories like The Attendant's Confession are written with a refinement of thought as well as of language. They are not, as so much of Brazilian literature must perforce seem to the stranger's mind, exotic. They belong to the letters of the world by virtue of the human appeal of the subject and the mastery of their treatment. Chief among the writers here represented stands Joaquim Maria Machado de Assis, 1839 to 1908. Born in Rio de Janeiro of poor parents, he was early beset with difficulties. He soon found his way into surroundings where his literary tastes were awakened and where he came into contact with some of the leading spirits of the day. The noted literary historians of his country, Silvio Romero and João Ribeiro, in their Compêndio de História da Literatura Brasileira, find the writing of his first period of little value. The next decade, from his 30th to the 40th year, is called transitional. With the year 1879, however, Machado de Assis began a long phase of maturity that was to last for 30 years. It was during this fruitful period that Memórias Póstumas de Brás Cubas, Quincas Borba, Histórias Sem Data, Dom Casmurro, Várias Histórias, and other notable works were produced. The 3 tales by Machado de Assis in this volume are translated from his Várias Histórias. That same bitter-sweet philosophy and gracious, if penetrating, irony which inform these tales are characteristic of his larger romances. 4 volumes of poetry sustain his reputation as a poet. He is found, by Romero and Ribeiro, to be very correct,